am going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Yoon so that we have a little bit more idea what he is all about. So Dr. Yoon is our speaker today. He's a chief economist and senior vice president of research at the National Association of REALTORS. He regularly provides commentary on real estate market trends for over our 1.5 million realtors. Dr. Yoon has appeared as a guest on C-SPAN's Washington Journal and is a regular columnist on the Forbes website. We are delighted to host him today as he shares his economic predictions with us, and going to be very excited to hear him talk. So Dr. Yoon, when you are ready, we are excited to hear from you. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Nathan, for the introduction and the invitation. The market condition, as everyone knows, has been undergoing through a transition, especially second half of last year. In fact, if we were to rewind, what we saw was a tremendous activity in 2020 and 2021. First quarter of last year, multiple offers were still happening. Second quarter of last year, things calmed down a bit. And in a sense, it was welcome because intense multiple offers are a big headache. Only one winner, 19 losers. 19 losers have to restart that process all over again. So it was somewhat welcoming that market calmed down. But the third quarter became worrisome, and the fourth quarter was ugly and painful. Now we are in a new year, and the key question is this painful period going to continue, or are we going to see some revival in the market? First, when I say painful condition, I'm talking about people in the industry, realtors, mortgage brokers, home builders. They're feeling the pain, fewer business opportunity. But for the homeowners, your past clients, whether they bought a home 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, they're doing fine. I mean, they feel fortunate that they were able to lock in at those low interest rates. They have really not seen their prices decline that much. I know from the list price, there's some price reduction in order to generate some interest. But even with that price reduction, the home prices today are substantially higher compared to, say, pre-COVID 2019. So homeowners are doing fine. There's no worry among homeowners. The worry is among the people in the profession with fewer business opportunity. So with this in mind, let me put the PowerPoint onto the screen and go from there. So bear with me as I do that. All right, so now you can see the screen. And I will assume the technology is working fine, so proceeding as such. This is the home sales movement, increase and decrease in 3 boxes. First box is pre-COVID, 2019. And in hindsight, pre-COVID activity was boring, very little changes up or down. Then the COVID occurred, ugly virus, disrupted our lives, but what do you know? Americans wanted to buy homes, bigger size home, and even out into the suburbs. So we had a real estate boom in 2020 and 2021. And this is, again, COVID is ugly, it disrupted our life, but one silver lining was that real estate truly boomed during this period. Then 2022 happened, and as you can see, sales steadily declined throughout 2022. Bigger declines with each passing months, such that by December, sales were down 35% nationwide compared to 1 year before. So substantial decline steadily. The key reason, we all know, mortgage rates. Because your clients who wanted to buy a home were still searching, and then by the time they were searching through September, October, they realized they simply cannot make the numbers work. Mortgage payment is way, way above their budget, or they cannot even get a loan approval at much higher mortgage rates. So rising mortgage rates throughout 2022 is the key reason as to why sales steadily slumped throughout last year. If we look at it on an annual basis, what happened last year, which is sales down annually 18%, from looking at all the monthly figures combined compared to 1 year before, down 18%. Less decline in the early months, larger decline in later months, but the annual total down 18%. And we are now essentially back to 2014 levels in terms of home sales. Now, Realtor membership have grown substantially from 2014 to 2022, so you can even say that the market has become super competitive in terms of trying to find the next client, with more Realtor members out doing business. But 2014 was the year when we were just coming out of the foreclosure crisis. Right in the middle of the graph shows the painful real estate cycle where we had the foreclosures. The only difference between the middle of the graph and what happened last year is that we don't have foreclosures, broadly speaking. One here, another one there, but not a massive foreclosure conditions. And also home prices so far are holding on. I mean, it's not falling, it's holding on conditions. But the unit sales, your business opportunity has plunged back down to 2014 conditions. If we look at the prices, this is the single family median home price across the country. Michigan, or I should say that generally the Midwest, whether Ohio, Indiana, home prices tends to be much more affordable compared to the rest of the country. But this is the national trend, and at least the trend line would be very similar to the national trend, even though Midwest home prices are a little more affordable, a little lower price than before. But you see the trend that occurred. Steady increase until around 2008, 2009, when there was a foreclosure crisis and prices declined, 30% decline. Once foreclosures were out of the way, then it set the condition for steady price increase. The last data point that you see, price decline, that's not really necessarily a price decline. We always see that every year during winter months. Home prices, or the homes that get sold during spring and summer, is always higher price compared to homes that get sold during the winter months, because it's type of homes. Families with school-age kid, they want to conduct sales in spring and summer because they want to make they don't want to disrupt their kids' school year. You don't want people to move to a new school in November or February. They want to do it during the summer months. So larger size homes generally get sold during spring and summer months, while smaller size homes can become more active during winter months. So the latest price dip that you see is not really a price decline, but it's something that happens every year. Winter months, little lower prices, or little smaller size homes getting transacted. This is directly off GMAR website. So in December, as I mentioned, the prices at $245,000, that is less than the close to $400,000 nationwide. And you see the number of transaction month supply at 1.8 months. That is still tight month supply. When we had the foreclosure crisis, month supply was 8, 9, 10 months. So this is still very tight market condition. I mean, it's not the 1 month supply, the super multiple offer situation, but I would say 4 months would be sort of normal. So to say that it is still under 2 months is implying that we are in a tight market condition, and the inventory is rising, but the total inventory on the market is below pre-COVID in most markets, and I'm sure this is the case in the greater metropolitan area, Realtors area, as well in the broader Detroit metropolitan region. So inventory rising because homes are sitting on the market a little longer, but it is still low inventory condition. This is the price appreciation in the greater Detroit, Warren, Dearborn region. So I think it covers several counties in the greater Detroit metro area. price appreciation from one year to the next. So back in the year 2000, there was some price appreciation. Then in the middle of the graph, you see the price decline, price decline, price decline. That was the foreclosure, painful period. But then price increases. In the past 2 years, right before last year, boom, huge increase, price gains of 12%, 15%. And I'm sure in some neighborhood, maybe 20% single year price appreciation. These are substantial gains. And that would translate into something like, say, homeowner, just by being homeowner in the greater Detroit region over the past 3 years, that would have accumulated maybe $70,000, $80,000 in housing wealth just for being a homeowner. So you're a homeowner. What has changed over the past 3 years? Home prices have risen. That's people's wealth. So that's quite substantial. Just for a little side information, 401k, the retirement account that people have working for General Motors, working for big companies, the average 401k account dollar value for people who are at age 55, so they are thinking about retirement in a few years, their average account value is around $80,000, $90,000 in 401k. But if someone was a homeowner in the greater Detroit region over the past 3 years, they would have accumulated similar amount just by being homeowner over the past 3 years. But the key question is, would the home prices still remain elevated, or would it going to go plunge down like you saw in the middle of the graph? That means housing wealth that was built up would then quickly just dissipate, disappear. So what is the prospect? In fact, you see it on the media, constant media. Housing market is tumbling down, not distinguishing that what is tumbling down is sales and not prices. But people see the headlines. Housing market is tumbling down. Maybe we're in for another housing market crash. So those are some of the headlines that your potential clients are reading. So I thought it's worthwhile, since this question is being raised, and it's a valid question. People have fresh memories of what happened, 12, 13 years ago. So it's a very valid question, but let's review some factual information. Not about opinions, just the facts. So let's look at it. First line, during the last housing cycle, and when I'm talking about last housing cycle, I'm looking at the foreclosure situation of 2008, 2010, 2011 period. I mean, it was several years of downturn. So during that period, America lost 8 million jobs during that period. Today, there's an announcement from technology companies to lay off workers. There's an announcement from Wall Street to lay off workers. Mortgage industry has definitely cut many jobs in the mortgage industry. So there are job cuts, but there are also job creation. And job creation is exceeding the job cut. So far, no net job cuts as of yet. So a little different. Second portion. How many people are receiving W-2 statement steady income? I know you are not receiving W-2 statement income. Your income fluctuates. But among people with steady income, how many people? Well, you see 130 million people back then. Today, 153 million more people working. So at least it's providing a little support income in the community, so far higher. Let's include the independent contractors. If we include independent contractors, you see today 158 million people working. That's 20 million more now compared to back in the year 2008, 2009 period. Subprime lending. For people who are new to the industry, you may not know it, but subprime lending is very risky. They don't even check people's income. You just show up and say, I need a mortgage, and then they gave you the mortgage. And you had all this teaser interest rate, maybe 1% interest rate for the first 6 months before it readjusts. Very, very risky stuff. Well, it blew up. So back then, widely prevalent subprime lending. Today, non-existent because of government regulation that says that in order to get a mortgage, you have to meet something called ability to repay standards. What a common sense. Do you have the financial capacity to repay the loan? And if the answer is yes, you get a mortgage. Now, of course, if you lose your job, you may not be able to pay mortgage, but assume you have a job and they will check your employment history to see whether or not you are vulnerable to job losses. But assuming that you have the ability to repay, you get a mortgage. So much different environment. What about the 5-year preceding the housing cycle? Was the builders overproducing? Meaning we had too much supply on the pipeline, and when this massive supply hit the market, there was too much oversupply and prices had to plunge. Are we in that situation? Well, you can see the numbers. Far fewer home building this cycle compared to the last cycle. So we don't have to worry about oversupply. In fact, if anything, you still say we need more inventory. There's a lack of housing. So we are in a housing shortage condition. Inventory on the market, 4 million homes back then nationwide, today 1 million. So roughly only 1/4 the level. So the inventory level in the greater Detroit region is rising somewhat, but it is much less than what it was, during the last cycle and definitely even during pre-COVID. Mortgage delinquency, even in a good economy, there's always some people who don't pay their mortgages or they run into some financial issues, but it is much lower. Foreclosures, less than 1%. So very, very different condition today versus back then in 2008, 2009, 2010 period. So all the headline about housing market crash, housing market tumbling down, but at least you can share this factual information. Let's look at some of the data in a little more detail. Mortgage delinquency by 90 days or longer. Not a single month mortgage delinquency, but someone who missed for 3 straight months or longer. And here's the graph. Middle of the graph is when subprime lending imploded, just blew up. Huge mortgage delinquency. The second circle that I put is in the early months of COVID. We were in a lockdown, stuck at home. We didn't know what to do, what's going to happen. And some people were very cautious and said, I don't want to pay mortgage. I need to save every single dollars and cent because I don't know what's going to happen. So mortgage delinquency rate increased somewhat. But what do you know? It declined. Once the economy reopened, people went back to work. So mortgage delinquency today at historically low levels. Distressed property sales, foreclosure sales, or something called short sales. Well, historically low. Only 1% of all transactions are classified as distressed property sales. Inventory level. I mentioned about inventory. We are in a short inventory condition, so much different environment. And here's an interesting graph. 2 lines. The blue line is the collateral value of the home, housing asset valuation. So you are a homeowner, you know their value, and then you have your neighbor, they have their value. You add up all the homes across the country, what is the asset valuation? And that's the blue line. You see in the middle of the blue line, little price decline. Again, that's the 2008 housing cycle. But today, home prices are still rising. Let me wait until this fire engine or police car passes by. I am in Washington, D.C. We are 3 blocks from the U.S. Capitol. And I don't know whether it is due to the proximity or not. There's always the sirens going on throughout the day. All right, so siren is done. So going back. So blue line is the home value asset valuation. The red line is mortgage debt total outstanding. So you know you have the mortgage debt, your neighbors have mortgage debt. Let's add all this up. So that is the bottom line. So what is interesting about this graph is the following. Look at the early part. You see the mortgage debt increase and home values were rising. So you can almost say that back in the early part, year 2000 to say 2007 period, we gave out too much loan, and that was the reason why home values increased. While this time around, you look towards the end of the graph, mortgage debt has not really risen all that much. It increased very small amount, not that much. So all the increase in home values are coming from not increased mortgage debt, but rather fundamentals of economics, supply and demand. Demand boomed during the early months of the COVID, while we just simply did not have the supply, multiple offers, so it was the supply and demand, not the excessive easy lending condition. Furthermore, the gap between the two would be the housing wealth. So housing wealth, quite substantial, which is the reason why homeowners' housing wealth is approaching something close to $300,000. So if you're a typical homeowner, you have about $300,000 in your housing wealth. Now, that's nation across. In the Detroit region, given the prices are more modest, the increase will be much less. And of course, people who are mortgage-free, someone who bought a home 30 years ago, you ask your grandmother, well, their housing is their housing wealth. While recent first-time buyers, they have not yet accumulated that much in the housing wealth because it takes years. But the renters have virtually nothing in their bank account. I think only about $5,000 to show for in terms of what do you have total. You sell your automobile, what do you have left over? Only around $5,000 for renters. So a huge difference between renters and homeowners in terms of wealth. And the key reason is this graph, that gap between the blue and the red showing the housing wealth difference. Home builders. Well, the home builders always face cycles, increase, decrease. Blue line is long-term average. I've extended this graph all the way to 1960, before most of the people here were born. So going back all the way to 1960s. So some years a little above, other years a little decline. So housing is a cyclical business. But look what happened in the 10 years prior to COVID, which I put in a box. We were underproducing compared to historical average and by a large amount. So the cumulative effect of this underproduction is that we had a housing shortage before COVID. Then it got exacerbated during the COVID years, during the real estate boom. Now you may say, well, we don't really have a housing shortage, but if somehow the buyers return to the market, not in a massive amount, but even some degree of buyers returning to the market, I'm not sure if we have adequate supply to meet the new buyers, because we are still short on housing given the multiple years, 10 years of underproduction prior to COVID. So not enough homes for sale out there for single family construction. But this is a multifamily home construction, principally apartments. Over 90% are apartments, not that much condominiums, at least right now. So what's happening on apartment building is they're actually above historical average. In fact, it is now at a 40-year high in terms of apartment building. So if you are, and many realtors don't have 401k, but their investment is their investment property. So investment property has done well. Your rental income has come in nicely. Home values have risen. So, you are getting the real estate investment asset price appreciation. So real estate investors have done well. But with so much apartment ready to hit the market, ready to come online, it's going to be tough trying to find a tenant. And consequently, expect apartment rent growth or rental income growth, if you're single family investors, to begin to calm down. So 2021 was good. 2022, last year, was still good. This year, it will only be modestly positive, with a possibility next year, 2024, it could actually turn negative. So if you're a real estate investor, we are seeing this huge apartment building activity, and that's going to make it tough for rent growth into the future. But it remains to be seen, no forecast is perfect, but my projection is calmer rent increase this year with the possibility even no rent increases next year for the rental market sector. Related to home buying, I am seeing some hopeful sign that buyers may return to the market. Back in late October, early November, mortgage rates shot up above 7%, shocking the market, which is the reason home sales declined in large amount. But since that time, mortgage rates have declined somewhat, then declined again. So for several consecutive weeks, we have seen some declines. The Federal Reserve will raise interest rate again in February and probably one more time in spring. But the mortgage market has already priced that information. They know they're going to do it, so it's not going to impact mortgage rate at all. So the mortgage rate right now is approaching 6%, which is much better than 7%. 3% mortgage rates, forget it, it's not going to happen in this for the next 20, 30 years, in my view. 4%, I don't think so either. 5% is a possibility, 6% may be the new normal. So we are essentially at the new normal level of around 6%. I mean, I purchased my first home at 8.5% mortgage rate, one of the best decisions that my wife and I made. And, you know, he provided the opportunity to trade up later and also refinance when the interest rate declined. So people bought a home at 7%. Well, if the mortgage rate goes down, they can always refinance. But right now, a little hopeful sign that declining mortgage rate is beginning to stir interest among some potential buyers. Maybe you are already seeing that. A little more foot traffic now compared to November, December. Maybe you already begin to sense that. Let me show you an interesting graph. There's two lines here. The top line is the mortgage rate trend, what you care about, what your clients care about. So the red line is the average mortgage rate. You know, some people are a little above, other people are a little below, but that's the average mortgage rate. Then there's something right below that blue line, and it moves very, very similarly. So what is that? That is a 10-year government bond yield. I'm in Washington, few blocks from the US Capitol. They are debating over this debt ceiling, how much government should borrow, and so forth. Well, every time they borrow money, they have to pay interest. And the interest they pay, in essence, is that blue line. So the blue line is what the government pays to borrow money, while the mortgage rate is a little above that. And in fact, two lines move very similarly together because NAR, we always advocate, and I'm sure some people in the audience, you participate in the governance process, you participate at the local association, at the state Michigan Realtors, and then some doing your volunteer at NAR committee work. So you know that NAR advocate for veterans loans to be government guaranteed, FHA mortgage to be government guaranteed, mortgage originated by Quicken Loan or by Bank of America eventually gets sold to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, which is government guaranteed. In other words, NAR policy is such that we want middle-class Americans to have access to buying a home. So let's try to keep the mortgage rate as low as possible. So whatever government borrows, mortgage rate should only be a little bit above that. So that's why the two lines move very similarly because of the government guarantee on most mortgages. But if you look at these two graphs under a microscope, you find the following, or before showing the next graph, see the gap between the two? So the spread. So I'm looking at the spread now, the gap between the two lines, and it looks like the following. The average spread is 170 basis point, or 1.7% gap. So whatever government borrows to buy a home, it should be only 1.7 percentage point higher. But current spread is much, much higher than that, 274 basis points. So in this graph, there are some times where things are abnormal, like right in the middle of the graph, you see a large spread, but then it quickly disappears. Then you see another large spread and quickly disappear, and now we are at the third large spread. I expect this spread to essentially disappear by late spring, early summer, based on past historical experience. So if that is the case, guess what? Mortgage rate will be 5.5% or even 5.4%. So if we had a normal spread, mortgage rate would be even lower. And this will definitely stir interest among potential buyers out there. So I am very hopeful that mortgage rate is already beginning to decline, and there's a room for even further decline by late spring, early summer. And if that's the case, buyers could return, not in a massive amount, but to some degree, buyers will return. And the key question becomes, are we going to have enough supply to meet that demand that is expected to or potentially come to the marketplace? Let me now turn to the economy. This is a GDP growth. There's a discussion about whether we are in a recession or not, or we are going to go into a recession. China is now doing, they are ending their COVID lockdown policies. So Chinese economy is expected to grow, even though I think, so there are a large number of people who are dying from COVID because they don't have the right vaccine or they have not been naturally immunized, because we are now, so Americans are far better immunized now compared to China. So China is undergoing some reopening of the economy. Europe is going to go into a recession because Germany, they are paying huge amount for gas and gasoline. You are complaining about your utility bill. In Germany, their utility bill is rising 4 times what it was 1 year ago. Now, they are subsidizing that through government subsidy, but that is also causing little harm in Germany. Ukraine GDP, they're down about 30%, major economic contraction because of the tragic situation that's happening out in Ukraine. But the graph that you see is America, United States. Early part of the graph shows the lockdown impact. Then when the economy reopened, a bursting of activity, but you see on the recently, it's very close to zero. In fact, we had 2 consecutive quarters of minor declines before the recent increase. So US economy is not truly healthy yet. It is just moving along sluggishly at the moment with some impact from a global economy. In terms of jobs, how many people have jobs? Early graph shows pre-COVID. Then the big decline is the lockdown. Hotel industry, they have to lay off every single individual. So lockdown. And then steady job increase. Now we have record number of Americans working. But something depressing for Michigan. Michigan is showing minus 0.7%. So what is minus 0.7%? This is the number of jobs in Michigan today, or the latest information, versus what it was in March 2020, right before COVID. So you are comparing before COVID and what it is in the latest information, and Michigan is down minus 0.7% in terms of jobs. Indiana, up 2.2%. One of the better performers in the Midwest, but you go to the southern states, like Florida, 6.3% positive, 6% more job. Texas, same thing, 6% more job. And then in the Rocky Mountain states, you see also like Utah and Idaho doing super well. So variation with Michigan lagging behind most other states. One of the key factor, I should not say key factor, contributing factor is degree of lockdown. States that had more severe lockdown are still negative. While states that reopen its economy very quickly, they're very positive. And of course, there's also the long run trend of people going into the southern states because of affordable homes or more job creation in the southern states. But Michigan is right now still a little negative. In terms of the overall jobs, just within the Detroit metropolitan area, again, several counties are surrounding the Detroit area. I don't know if this includes, let me see, Livingston County, because I think Livingston County could be over with the Lansing or not. But anyway, it covers large metro area, large counties near Detroit. So from year 2000 to the latest, one unique aspect of this graph is that America suffered a recession back in 2008. Remember the foreclosure crisis? But what this shows is that Detroit actually suffered recession or depression from the time of Y2K. Remember that at the turn of the century, people were concerned about Y2K. From that point, for the next 10 years, Detroit area lost jobs because of the restructuring in the auto industry. So massive job cuts throughout 10-year condition. In fact, it looks like 400,000 fewer jobs over the first decade of this century. Then once the foreclosure crisis were out of the way, some job returning, then the COVID hit, lockdown, more severe lockdown in Michigan, you lost jobs. Then now you are trying to come out and you are not fully recovered yet, down slightly, minus 0.6%, but ready to come to the positive territory. Office market, just on the commercial quickly. Commercial real estate is doing reasonably fine, except for office. Office market is really suffering. And I'm in Washington, many of the office buildings are still empty. Federal employees are working from home. They have yet to return to office. So office vacancy is a key question into the future. Will people return to office, whether San Francisco, Washington, New York, downtown Detroit? We're still seeing rising vacancy rate. I show this not only as a concern for people who are owning office building, but for you who are trying to sell real estate for homes. Because I think this trend is implying that return to office 5 days a week will never happen. There will be some degree of hybrid model. And if that is the case, people will begin to say, why am I in San Francisco when I can be in further away into the next county where things are more affordable? And for some companies who are saying you can work from home forever, people will be saying, look, I grew up in Michigan. I got my job in San Francisco, but now if I don't have to come to office, well, what do you know? I want to go back to my childhood area. I had a good memory of it. So I'm going to Michigan because I can buy a mansion in Michigan compared to a small condominium in San Francisco. So this trend is actually good for you or good for areas with affordable home prices. So I think this trend of rising office vacancy rates across the country, whether it is in Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle, Boston, Washington. You know, some people grew up in Michigan, or maybe now they have some idea they're searching across the country. Great advertisement by Michigan, you know, the Lake Michigan, come enjoy the recreation activity. You know, during the winter months is good. During the summer months, even better. So all this may begin to entice people to come to Michigan. So anyway, I'm just trying to illustrate that rising office vacancy rate will benefit more affordable regions of the country, like Michigan, where some people may say, heck with New York, I'm going to Michigan and work from there. Now to the forecast, coming towards the end of my presentation. Mortgage rate already peaked in my view, so it's going to steadily decline, especially as those abnormal spreads disappear. So what will this do? Well, related to home prices, we had a strong home price growth, but this year, I don't think we're going to see a meaningful change in home prices. This is a national forecast. I think the Midwest market will still remain positive, generally speaking, whether Indianapolis, Grand Rapids, Detroit region, because it's very affordable. But nationally, no meaningful changes in home prices this year because, again, we have reduction in demand and supply is still reasonably tight, so no meaningful movement either way. It could be +5, it could be -5, I don't know for sure, but it's not going to be -30, and it's not going to be +20. It's not going to be big swings. It's going to be very close to zero. Home sales. I think the worst in home sales may be this quarter, first quarter of this year. So throughout last year, we saw steady reduction in sales. Fourth quarter was ugly. Maybe the first quarter of this year will be something similar, then some pickup. The data is seasonally adjusted, so we are accounting for the normal busier spring home buying season. So I think the worst in home sales is pretty much right now, before some pickup. But note the boxes. Blue box is all of last year, 4 quarters combined, while the red box is this year's forecast. So if you look at the total box, even though we are essentially coming to an end in terms of the sales decline, the total number of home sales in the blue box is actually higher than the red box. So for the annual total, if you go to the annual total, the green bar, 2023, I think the unit sale will still be down about 7% in this year, even though the worst is coming to an end. Prices, no meaningful change. So the dollar volume, if you're a large broker, will be down somewhat this year. But the way to view it is the following. 2019, first year, boring. 2020 and 2021, boom, double-digit revenue growth. Then last year was transition, but even with transition, prices were up. So the dollar volume only declined in a single digit. It's going to decline in single digit again. So 2 years of double-digit gain, followed by 2 years of single-digit declines. Then 2024, I really begin to see that Federal Reserve may actually cut interest rate because inflation has come down by then. Continuing job creation, so very solid condition next year. So we are undergoing through this transition, hold tight, and then I think we will steadily improve, and certainly you will see a much improved condition next year. So thank you for giving me a chance to share some of my thoughts with you all. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Nathan. So thank you very much.
We do have a few questions in the chat, if you would be able to clarify some.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Yoon. That was awesome. Always a lot of insight, and appreciate you giving some further details. So we do have a few questions here. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to try and do them in order if that's possible. Just 1 second.
I can help you with that, Nathan. One was
I got the first one here, I think. So, Doctor, you sort of touched on this about the anticipation of when you're seeing rates dropping below 6 or possibly getting close to 5. I think you said possibly maybe this spring.
Yes, so I think the 5.5% mortgage rate is a distinct possibility, or even probability, likely probability, based on this abnormal spread we have. And once that abnormal spread disappears, and it always disappears in a 3, 4, 5 months time period, so we are looking at 5.5% by late spring, early summer.
Thank you. So kind of still staying with the interest rate theme, that's the hot topic. We had a question here. It said, can you explain what were the events that led to having historically abnormally low interest rates of 3% or below? Was COVID and the halt of business services production and supply chain issues the entire reason? And was the upside of the housing market and what was the unintended consequences of those reductions?
So the interest rate went to a super low 3% once in a lifetime, or someone, people have never seen anything like that, because the government pursued a massive stimulative policy. People received their stimulus check, that's one. But the other part was the Federal Reserve essentially went all in, cut interest rate all the way down to 0. They did something called quantitative easing, which means that once all those mortgages went to Fannie and Freddie, Federal Reserve purchased that in order to lower the interest rate on those things even more. So Federal Reserve went all in because of uncertain environment, and that caused mortgage rate to fall to 3%. And of course, once the economy began to revive, the government said, well, we need to also begin to normalize our normal thing. At the same time, inflation. You go to grocery store, things are expensive. You go to gas station, things are expensive. So we cannot have this high inflation. And one way to tame inflation is to raise interest rates. So that's the history of the recent mortgage rate trends.
Great. So kind of shifting gears a little bit, Dr. Yoon, we have a question here. It said, are foreclosures rising, declining, or staying about the same in Michigan? And I think one of your graphs earlier touched on that.
So, if one wants to be precise on statistics, one can say it is increasing. But if one wants to be looking at to say, how meaningful is that? And it's just coming off very, very lows, so slight increase. And you may say in 2023, this year, it could be the second lowest foreclosure in the past 15 years, and something of that. So it is increasing factual statistical information, but it's increasing from such a low levels that is not that impactful.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. So a question regarding the Fed rate and so forth. So the Fed rate in 2022 went from 0.25% in March to 4.5% in December. When should we expect to see the full impact on the economy? Do you expect to see an increase in unemployment, credit card debt? Will there be a shift in the housing market, et cetera?
And Fed is not done. They're going to do 2 more times a rate increase, so it's going to be closer to 5% before everything is done. But they're doing this because they have a duty to do. You know, what is their mandate? What is their charter? Why is there Federal Reserve? And it says to help the economy gain employment, but also control inflation. So employment condition right now is fine because low unemployment rate, you know, there are job cuts, but also job creation. So employment conditions are fine. But what is not fine is inflation, high inflation. So to contain inflation, they're raising interest rates, trying to hold back some economic activity to contain inflation. So that's why we are not going to have a robust economic activity or robust job creation, but more sluggish marching forward. It is marching forward, but more sluggishly.
Dr. Yoon, one last question for you. We really appreciate all your time today. And this is related to apartments. So is the increase in apartment buildings also happening in the Metro Detroit area, or are these nationwide numbers?
Yeah, these are nationwide numbers. So, you know, you have to look specifically in the Detroit area to look at it. But nationwide, we are at the 40-year high in apartment buildings.
Great. Dr. Yoon, once again, thank you so much on behalf of myself, everybody at GMAR. We really appreciate all that you do and the effort that you put into it, and how you make all this information so digestible and usable in our business every day. So thank you so much for all your time. Everybody that attended, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. I hope you guys got something out of it today. I know I did. I've got a whole book full of notes here. And a couple things just to kind of keep on your calendars. For GMAR, February 15th, we have photo day at the GMAR offices. Stop by anytime between 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. to get a professional photo taken. March 15th, introduction to working with international buyers and sellers. It's a global event. It will be held at Urban Rest in Ferndale, Michigan. From 4 to 6 p.m. This should be a great event. The global event last year was fantastic, and this is going to get into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts on how to work with folks in that market. April 20th, we have our fair housing event held at the Michigan State Education Center in Troy, Michigan from 8:30 a.m. to 2 p.m. We are going to have some awesome national speakers come in and talk to us about fair housing. And a really nice, well-done event that if you were there last year, I don't really need to tell you too much more about that. April 24th, elected officials breakfast at the Kingsley in Bloomfield Hills from 9 a.m. to 11. It's supposed to be 11 a.m. It's a really great event. You get to talk to local officials, find out where they stand on issues, educate them on some of the things that we're seeing out in the marketplace, and get to spend some time with people that are normally super busy and not technically accessible. June 10th, one of the best events of the summer is our Summer in the Park. It's going to be at Firefighters Park in Troy, Michigan. If you've ever been to Firefighters Park, you'll know it's an awesome place to be. And you can expect to enjoy all types of summertime activities, arts and crafts, some great food. It was a really awesome event and a great way to give back to the communities that we work in every single day. So please note these in your calendar. I would love to see as many of you there. Any events that you attend, bring a friend, knock on your office, the doors in your office and say, let people know about these events because you're going to get a real great opportunity to network, build your business that way, and get some great education. So thank you so much for attending today, and I will talk to everybody soon. Have a great day.